great showing. In case we have not met, I'm Patty Smith. I'm the services assistant here at Wilcott Commons. And, oh, hello. And part of what I do here is to assist with programming events like these. So we're really thrilled to have Anthony Everett here today. Anthony is a 14-time Emmy Award-winning anchor of WCVB's Channel 5's nightly news magazine, Chronicle. I think I have to say that of all the news on TV, it's probably the happiest show out there. I will give you that. He has won countless prestigious awards, and he always finds time to donate his time to the many charities, such as us, that are near and dear to him. So we have a list up here of all of his charities. If anybody would like to donate on his behalf, we can give that to you. In his free time, he loves spending time between the mountains and the ocean, and mostly just being here with friends and family. So let's give a hometown welcome to Anthony Everett.
That's very nice. Thank you very much. Great to be here. Happy Halloween to everybody. It's funny, I'm actually, a little secret here, I've never been a huge Halloween fan. And the reason I think is that I was born and raised in New York City, a little known fact, right in Manhattan. And generally if someone with a mask came knocking on your door, that was a bad day. So I was never really wild about Halloween. But you know, you sort of always want what you don't have, and when I was growing up in New York City, as much as I loved the experience of growing up in the city, I always knew I wanted something different. I wanted a backyard, I wanted a place to play, I wanted dogs, I didn't want to be confined to an apartment. And we ultimately stumbled upon this unbelievably wonderful community of Cohasset. I cannot tell you what this community has meant to me. We've lived here for 25 years. I educated my children here, raised them here, and the embrace we got from Cohasset when we moved here, and the friends we have made along the way, and the just support we have felt from this community, both professionally and personally, has been unbelievable. It's the greatest move I ever made in my life, and I'm so grateful to be here, and to be here with you today as well. We lived in Wayland before we moved to Cohasset, and when we first moved into town, I remember my friends at work saying, why did you move so far away? You know, in Wayland, you're 8 miles from the studio. You can be here in a heartbeat. Why did you go so far away? And initially, I would try to explain to them, well, you know, it's this unbelievable community of friendly people, and there's an ocean, and there's parks and trails and all these fun things to do. And they kind of didn't get it, and they kind of didn't get it. And then once we settled in, I was sort of like, I don't know if I want anybody else to come here. Never mind, we'll make the commute, But I am grateful to this community, and I do have very fond memories of living on Linden Circle, just off Linden Drive, which, as many of you know, like Fair Oaks, is maybe one of the 2 best Halloween trick-or-treating locations on the South Shore, as they came in van load after van load. And we finally got smart on Linden Circle, the 3 houses that were on Linden Circle, and we just put a table at the end of the street. And if it was on a weekend, we pulled the television out so we could have the Patriots on, and we might have had a frosty beverage or 2 nearby, and we just threw candy at the kids as they came by. It seemed like a good way to do it. So I do now have fonder memories of Halloween than I did as a child in New York. You know, I'm reminded of, one more thing about New York, because I just saw my friend Tom Carroll as I was walking in. Despite having been born and raised in New York, I was never a Yankees fan, and I am a Red Sox fan. Okay, let me try this. I like mom and apple pie, too. Okay, there we go. It's a cheap one. But Tom could never understand why I wasn't a Yankees fan. His line to me was, you were born to roam, born to the empire. Why would you abdicate that? And I said, there's something compelling about the lovable loser, which they were for so long. And I embraced that fully and got to spend time with many of the Red Sox during my career as a journalist here. And so I embraced it fully. My son, on the other hand, was a diehard Yankees fan because they were winning when he was a young boy, so he wisely went with a winner. And on Red Sox Spirit Day, he would often go to school with a Yankees cap on. And I would say to him, I cannot help you. You are on your own here, buddy. 8 years old, I don't care. Good luck to you out there. I want to talk about Chronicle, but I wanted to start with 2 phrases that come to mind a lot to me these days. One is, of course, may you live in interesting times, and the other is be careful what you wish for. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And we certainly are living in interesting times. I don't really recall a time in my lifetime, maybe the late 60s, but that really, I wasn't that cognizant of that at the time, where we have been so divided and so fundamentally at odds with one another on so many issues fundamental to our way of life and our way of living. And so seemingly unable to come to any kind of common ground and have a respectful dialogue about important things. And do not worry, this will not be a political speech in any way. It's just an observation from someone who has spent my life as an observer. That is what we do as journalists. We are observers. I've been a journalist for 39 years. It'll be 4 decades next year. And you know, the job has essentially always been the same, which is to collect or gather information, and we sort of synthesize that, process that information, and then regurgitate it, broadcast it, or write it, or broadcast it on radio or television to the world around us. And hopefully that job informs, educates, and sometimes entertains our viewers. And I've always said, too, that communication really is sort of fundamental in a way to our humanity, right? Cavemen wrote on cave walls to communicate something to others. Town criers gathered in the town square to broadcast information to each other. Oral histories have passed on traditions from generation to generation in the past, and they still do that today. So I've always felt, in my own way, that journalism was kind of a noble calling, that it spoke to this fundamental need and truth that we need to communicate with each other. And I've been proud to be a part of this profession for a long time. I said before that I've been a professional observer, because that's really what you are as a journalist. And the idea is that you observe and you report, as I said, fairly, unbiasedly, without prejudice. And for the most part, good journalists do exactly that. Now, do all journalists do that? I think you know the answer. And without picking an ideological side, whether it's Fox News on one side or MSNBC on the other side, what happened is that advocacy began to creep into journalism, right? Journalism is not advocacy. You don't stake out a position, you don't push an agenda. And that began really, actually, a long time ago. There were efforts to do that in the late 60s, throughout the 70s, and you all know that it's sort of the state of the realm, if you will, now. And what's good, I think, is that all of us in this room probably understand that distinction between advocacy and journalism. I'm not sure the younger generation understands that, because they've been fed both at the same time. And I think they find it very hard to distinguish what is someone's opinion versus what is an actual fact. As you all know, it seems increasingly difficult to agree on what the truth is. And we are not supposed to do that as journalists. We're supposed to be impartial observers and reporters, not advocates. And I think that confusion of what we do has led to our division. It's been a big part of our division, and it's undermined the trust in some of our fundamental institutions that are really foundational to us as a country, as a society, as a democracy, whether it's our courts or our elections, our political figures, and our free press. And to me, those are really fundamental and important things that we have to have some faith in those. We have to have some faith in facts. And to the extent that journalism does that, it's a noble calling. When journalism doesn't, it's a problem. And I think, unfortunately, we're at a point right now where we're in a problem. I will tell you this. Here's what I think makes a good journalist, for those of you who might have children or grandchildren who are interested in the profession, because I hear from many friends who have children that are interested in getting into the business. What I always tell people is it's essential to be curious in, interested about, and engaged with the world around you. You have got to be, as a person, curious, interested, and engaged. Why are things the way they are? How could things be better than the way they are? Why does this work this way? Why doesn't this work that way? My father used to joke that I futzed with everything. You know, why are you touching everything all the time? And I used to think, isn't that a good thing? Like, I'm curious, I'm interested, I understand why the way things work. But I think that's fundamental to a journalist. That might seem a little contradictory. You're observers, but you're also participants. No. In your personal life, in your personal and intellectual pursuits, you need to be curious, interested, and engaged, right? But as a reporter, hopefully those traits have given you sort of a broad base of understanding of the world around you that then ultimately make you a good journalist. The other thing I tell young journalists is you have to meet your deadlines. This is not a dog ate my homework business at all. We have a name for journalists who don't make deadlines. They're former journalists. Because there's no missing the lead story on the front page of the Boston Globe. There's no missing the 6 o'clock lead on Channel 5, 4, 7, whatever, news at night. You have to be there. You got to get it done. And I've met plenty of people that can't get it done, and they're former journalists. The other thing is, if you want to stay in this profession, you have to keep that intellectual curiosity. You can't rest on those laurels. And there are also, in my particular practice of journalism, in broadcast journalism, you will come across people who are good journalists who happen to be practicing that craft on television, and you will come across people who just want to be on television. There's a huge difference between those two people. Generally, it's the good journalists who I would call the cream that rise to the top. But there are plenty of people in my business, and I think this is increasingly true of the younger generation, who have lived sort of an exhibitionist lifestyle on social media that they just expect to be performative. We're not performative. I mean, there's a performance element, obviously, to broadcast television, even to print journalism. You're writing something down every day. But that's not what helps you succeed in this business, or in life for that matter, in my opinion. Good journalists do the hard work. We call it the spade work. Like, you gotta dig and find facts and look for resources and sources and double check facts. It's a lot of hard work. It's not an easy business. Difficult schedules, tough deadlines, demanding executives that want performance, but it can be unbelievably rewarding. So how did I get into this? Well, I really stumbled into journalism. I went to Tufts University here in Boston and Medford and Somerville, and I got a job at the local newspaper, or volunteered for work at the local newspaper, and worked my way up, and I was editor-in-chief of the Tufts Daily. There actually aren't that many daily college newspapers in America. It's very demanding on a college student's time. So I was very proud of the work we did at the Tufts Daily. So I had some journalism experience, but I was double majoring in English and philosophy, which I joke now qualified me to drive a cab or be a journalist, and I think I made a good choice. And I actually had applied to law school. A lot of the law classes, pre-law classes at Tufts were in the philosophy department, so I applied to law school after graduating from Tufts. And in the interim, waiting to hear back on those applications, I convinced two friends of mine to, let's go skiing in Colorado for a couple of weeks and, just take some time off while I'm waiting to hear on my law school applications. So we went out for 2 weeks. They left after 2 weeks. I kind of fell in love with Colorado. And about 2 weeks later, I met a girl in a bar. As I like to say, there's always a woman. But she was working at the local radio and TV station. It was a small radio and TV station based in Aspen, Colorado. The radio station is still there, KSPN-FM, still a going concern. The TV station is long gone. But I stumbled into a job in sports. They were looking for a sportscaster. And I was actually in Colorado this past weekend with my son, who just moved out there. He's 30 years old. He's spending a couple of years out there. And we were talking about the fact that, I had no broadcast experience, and I walked into this audition with my pink Brooks Brothers Oxford shirt on and a gold chain, which he found mortifying, and somehow got the job. And they were desperate, obviously, and I spent about a year doing sports, and then realized, there's very limited opportunity in sports broadcasting, especially back then. This was pre-ESPN, and you were always competing against whatever athletes competed in that various markets that you might want to move to. So I knew there were more jobs in news. It seemed like a better career path, and it seemed more rewarding to me than covering sports. And so I made the switch over to news. I left Aspen after about 4 years. I got my first affiliate job at WVIT in Connecticut, the NBC affiliate there, and then from there I was working 5 days a week there, and coming up here on the weekends to freelance at Channel 5. And ultimately Channel 5 had a job for me, and I left Connecticut and moved up here full time. What's been really nice for me is I've had 2 completely separate careers in the same building for the same company. I spent a full 17 years in our news division, first as a nightside general assignment reporter, then a weekend anchor, then the weekday anchor. I replaced Jack Curtis after he left, and Natalie and I, as you may remember, you all know Natalie Jacobson, I'm sure. Natalie and I anchored together for about 7 years, and then Peter Mehegan was leaving. He was retiring, and they asked me if I wanted to move over to Chronicle, and I was really hesitant. I kind of loved what I was doing in news. I didn't really know if I wanted to try something different and step away from the sort of pace and excitement of news. And Peter was unbelievably encouraging, and I have thanked him many times. Peter lives in Situate. Many of you may stumble upon him. I think he's getting a haircut over here at Pat's, so he's around a fair amount, and I see him a lot. And I have always thanked him for encouraging me to make that leap. I actually did both for about 3.5 years. I was still anchoring our news and also doing Chronicle, but you really couldn't do Chronicle fully because you couldn't travel, because I was so tied to the news desk. And so I made the leap. And just as Peter said, I think it's been the happiest and most rewarding part of my career. People often ask if I miss the news side of things, and there are moments when a very big story is happening, and I kind of miss that adrenaline rush of being on top of it. But news is a tough, broadcast news in particular, is a very tough business. There's a lot of demands on your time. You really are never free. No matter where you are on vacation, if something big happens, you'll get called back. You know, if there's a snowstorm or some other event or a tragedy like we just saw horribly up in Lewiston, you know, you're called in, and you may be there for 2, 3, 4, 5 days and never go home. It's very tough on your family life. It's very tough on your schedule. There's a lot of nights, a lot of weekends. So I miss sometimes that really being in the thick of everything that's happening, covering presidential campaigns, interviewing senators. You know, it's very intoxicating. But what I don't miss is that stress and that demand on your life. And what's so wonderful about Chronicle is very few places on television anymore do you get to tell a story over the course of a half an hour. The closest thing at the network level, I always say, is CBS Sunday Morning. I don't know if you folks watch that show, but I mean, it's basically what we do. We just do it in a half an hour. They do a wonderful, wonderful job at it. Chronicle is the longest-running locally produced television news magazine, kind of a mouthful, in the history of television. And if you stack it up against all network programming, there's only a handful of other television shows that have actually been on longer than Chronicle. And many of those are weekly shows. So the fact that we are on 5 nights a week, we try to produce about 150 to 175 new programs every year. We hear from you when it's a repeat. We know. We can't fill every night with a brand new show. We've had multiple network executives come to the station and go, how do you do this? Like, they send out crews of people and lighting technicians and audio technicians, and we're a band of 3. There's a correspondent generally, a producer, and a photographer. That's it. And we only have 3 photographers to put 150 to 175 original programs on the air every year. So we work hard, and we work fast, and we work smart, and after 42 years, we kind of figured out how to do it. But I also don't think that you could do this any other place in the country but New England. Maybe the San Francisco Bay Area, but you can't do this in Amarillo, Texas. You can't do this even in Dallas or Jacksonville, Florida. New England is special, and New England is unique. There are I don't really know that there's any place else in the country that has this rich mix, right, of geographic diversity. We have mountains and we have ocean within striking distance of each other. We have this great cultural diversity in Massachusetts, our educational community, our medical community, our business community, and of course, oh, by the way, all of the history that we have throughout New England. And the colorful characters that we have throughout New England. They help a lot. Some little farm up in Maine, you get a lot of interesting stories from the people who have spent their lives and their time living in New England. So I think it's because we have all of that at our disposal in a 6-state area. The Chronicle has survived as long as it has, and we have good people. You know, we've got really talented producers, correspondents, and actually, interestingly, we had some changeover right before COVID hit. We lost some of our longtime producers, some of whom had been with us for 30 of those years, 35 of those years. So we've had kind of a generational shift at Chronicle. And at one point, we lost both our executive producer and our managing editor to retirement. And these were sort of seismic shifts for us. You know, when people are someplace for 30 years and they leave a hole. And how are we going to fill that? And we went to someone who had never been in television before, but was a producer of newspaper articles and opinion pieces, but had no broadcast experience, but definitely knew the show. We found Peter's daughter, Julie Mahegan. Julie Mahegan, who had worked for the Lowell Sun, who had been on the op-ed staff, the editorial staff at the Boston Herald, who had gone to work in the Baker administration, so she really knew journalism, she really knew the city, she really knew the state, and she certainly knew the program. And she's been one of the greatest additions that Chronicle has ever had. And the fact that she's Peter's daughter and has all that legacy and that history has really been rewarding and wonderful. I see Peter and I see his wife, Julie's mother, Julianne, and she always says to me, she's working too hard, tell her to go home. So when I leave at night, I'm like, Julie, go home. Because your mother will be mad at me if you don't go home. You know, it sort of gets to the hours that we keep at Chronicle. There are people ask me, what's your schedule like? When do you go in? You know, this sort of thing. And it's very variable. I mean, generally, the show is live, first of all. At 7:30 at night, if we're in the studio, we're live. Except for Friday nights. That's a new thing. That actually was sort of an outgrowth of COVID. We did start to tape some shows during COVID just to limit everyone's exposure into the building. I won't go too far down that path, but also our millennial staff doesn't really like to work on Friday nights. So they had this idea, why don't we tape the Friday night show on Wednesday morning and we can all have Friday nights off? And at first I'm like, I don't know if I love this idea. I do think there's an immediacy and an excitement to live television that you really can't replicate when you're taping the show at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning on a Wednesday. But then as I had more and more Friday nights off, and was back in Cohasset by sunset, or on the boat, or sitting at the beach, I thought, you know what, I can get used to this. It's not so bad, I can definitely do this. So my hours are generally 12 to 8. You know, that's an 8-hour day, but it's never an 8-hour day. You know, oftentimes I leave here at 8 or 9 in the morning, I'm up to Maine or New Hampshire, and that's a day trip. Like, I'll go up somewhere in New Hampshire or Vermont or Maine, and I'll come back and make it in time for the show. So those are long days. If I am working 12 to 8, people ask about the commute. It's 33 miles door to door, and it's 40 minutes because I'm going in around noon and I'm coming home. Well, the show ends at 7:58, 47 about, and I can be in the car by 8:01. So I'm home generally by 8:45. Except for those days when obviously we're out covering stuff. My son asked me, I said I was out visiting him, he asked me years ago, just like other people did, you know, do you miss the news business at all? And when I first left and I was really fully out of news, I still had that sort of instinct that whenever the phone went off, or back then the pager went off, that I should check. because who knows? Might still be a news story that maybe they need me. I should probably still have some sort of hand on the pulse of what's going on in the world. So we were on vacation on Block Island, actually. And we were all relaxing at the beach, having a wonderful day, and the phone went off, and I checked. He goes, "What are you doing? You're on vacation?" I said, "I just feel like I should check, something might be going on." This is when I was doing Chronicle full time. And he said, "Oh, what, Dad? Do you think a bed and breakfast burned down somewhere?" Nice kid. I said, "No, but let's not forget that bed and breakfast paid for this vacation, your college education, and a few more things, my friend." So, another time, we were coming out of French Memories, actually. He was only about 7 or 8 years old, and it was before I was doing Chronicle, and someone recognized me and stopped me, and we had a very lovely conversation. We got in the car, and he goes, "Dad, it's not fair." 7 years old. So what do you mean it's not fair? He goes, "It's not fair. Everybody recognizes you and nobody knows who I am." Well, you're 7. You've done some things, not a lot. But what I did say to him, and it's kind of a line I've repeated a lot, my business brings a certain amount of recognition. And what I said to him at the time is I'd much rather be recognized for being a good husband and a good father and a good citizen than just the fact that they happen to see me on television. Those conversations are nice. People sometimes ask, does it bother you when people come up to you? And of course not. I mean, generally they come up and they say nice things. They love the program, they've been watching for years, and that's charming. And I also get to meet people. I know people that have left the business, and I've asked, what do you miss about television? Do you miss the, that sort of adrenaline rush of being live on TV every night, or all these different things? And most people say the same thing. I kind of miss those little interactions. I kind of miss those little moments in the grocery store or the drugstore where kind of everybody knows me and somebody wants to say something nice, and I learn a little something about their life. And I think that's the part I'll miss too. I don't think I'll miss someday, not too far away, I don't think I'll miss, that being on TV or being a part of Chronicle. I mean, there were aspects of it, obviously, that travel that I will miss. But I think mostly I'll miss those little interactions. We just did a show, mindful of time, we just did a show in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole, which was wonderful. I've always actually vacationed there with my father on a dude ranch when I was in my teens and early 20s. So I've always had this fondness for Jackson Hole, and we had some leftover money in our budget, and they said, do you want to go for a trip? Why don't you pick up a spot? And so we went to Jackson Hole, which is, if you haven't been, is one of the most spectacularly beautiful places in the country, by far. And we had, we had a great time. We did some very exciting things. We did rock climbing, we did horseback riding, and I'm sending pictures to my wife, back and forth, and she is sending me pictures of her 2 computer screens with Excel spreadsheets open up. "You are having a much better day than I am," she often says. And it is true. It's still work. I still have a boss. We still have office politics and all these sorts of things. But yes, one day I'm on an oyster farm, the next day I'm in Wyoming, the next day I'm meeting some scientist who's come up with some great discovery. I never lose sight of how fortunate I've been in my career to have those opportunities and to share them with a broad audience. People ask a lot about ratings. How big is the audience? How much input do we get back about our viewers? Have any of you ever been a Nielsen household? Has anyone ever participated in the rating system? Well, that's probably because the entire rating system for Boston, the greater Boston market, which is more than 3 million people, came down to about 600 houses that sampled and reported what they were watching. And it used to be a diary. They just literally the family would write down who was in the room and what they were watching and how long they were watching it. This is what we lived and died by and sold advertising by. It's a little more sophisticated now. It's electronic. It's called People Meter, where you now have sort of a remote that you punch in A, B, C, D, and E. That tells you A is dad, B is mom, C is 18-year-old child, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now they actually have pagers, they look like pagers, that receive a signal from the television. So it knows exactly who's in the room, if the right person's wearing the pager, and exactly what they're watching and how long they're watching it. So when do we find this out? We find it out the next morning. So I will know tomorrow morning exactly how tonight's program did, and that's broken down by total viewers, and then by gender, male, female, and then demographics, which is 18 to 25, 25 to 54, 54 to 65, 65 plus. There's even a P2 plus, which is everybody over the age of 2. I don't know if the 3-year-olds are in there wearing their little pages, or where they get this information from, but I always thought it's sort of a very capricious and somewhat unreliable way to do business. We used to joke that 3 guys in Fitchburg go out to dinner and our ratings go down. It's astonishing to me that in the age that we live in and the technology that we have at our disposal, that we don't have a better way of figuring out exactly how we're doing. I will say this, on a good night, on a good night, we're over 300,000 viewers to 400,000 viewers. That's a lot. That fills Gillette Stadium a few times. And unique viewers day to day, they change. We know you basically tune in and maybe watch the beginning of the show and make a choice. Like, am I in tonight or am I out tonight? And if you're out, you go to Jeopardy. Our old executive producer used to say, "Damn you, Trebek." But we understand Jeopardy's a wonderful program. But those are the kinds of numbers that we see. And I often tell some of our newer producers, don't live and die by the ratings. Yes, the ratings are important. This is how we make money. This is the currency of our business, is the ratings. And that's what our sales team goes out and sells. But you produce a program. You've given your heart and soul to that program. You have produced, hopefully, the best possible product you can produce. Will you change anything? No. So if the ratings aren't great that night, it's not because this show wasn't good or you didn't do your best or you didn't put out the best product. It's because 3 guys in Fitchburg went out to dinner and you didn't get a good night of ratings. So I tell people, really don't sweat the ratings. Yes, it's what makes us money, but it's not the ultimate arbiter of what we do as a program. The quality that we produce, I think, is the ultimate arbiter. Unfortunately, we've got good people doing that. The greatest compliment I often say that we get at Chronicle is when we hear back from someone that we've covered, maybe we've covered their business or their life story or their personal achievement or their personal tragedy, whatever it may be, and we hear back something like this, because now we've spent time with them and they've trusted us. I mean, there's a real thing that happens when you sit down with somebody and put a camera in front of their face and start asking questions, right? They have to have some trust in you. And you have to, there's a little pre-work that goes on to kind of get them comfortable and make sure that they're at ease when they're having this conversation. But ultimately, they trust you with their story. And the ultimate compliment we get is when they write to us and they say, you know what? I wasn't sure how that was going to turn out. And you absolutely captured the essence of my business, my story, my life, and I can't thank you enough for that. That's rewarding to me. That means so much more to me than the ratings, because we have then validated the trust they placed in us. And I think we do that on a regular basis. And that is what makes me really proud of what we do at Chronicle. We are given this opportunity to share these stories with all of you. And I think we do that with respect and with faith and with decency and honoring the stories that these people are willing to open up and share with us. The last thing I'll say, because I want to leave time for Q&A, I hope you have some questions, is I'll end with sort of paraphrasing a quote that kind of sums up, I think, why I got into this business and why I stayed in this business. David McCullough, you all know, the wonderful historian and author who just passed last year. His son, David McCullough Jr., was giving a speech at Wellesley High School. And he sort of ended the speech with, and I'm going to paraphrase, but this is essentially what it said. Climb the mountain and plant your flag. not so the world can see you, but so you can see the world. And I think that's why I got into journalism and why I stayed in journalism. I went not so other people could see me. I just happened to be a journalist practicing my craft in a business where you do see me. But that's not why I did it. I did it because I wanted to understand the world around me. I wanted to plant my flag and see the world. And I have. And the fact that I've gotten the opportunity to share it with all of you, with all of our viewers, has been unbelievably rewarding, as has talking to you today. Thank you very much.